Limitless, Episode 10, Arm-ageddon. This show was made for streaming. I've said it before, but I'm saying it again. We pick right up where we left off last week, Brian telling his dad all about NZT. Brian calls being on NZT a version of himself he has always wanted to be, and a version of himself his dad has always wanted him to be. Basically, Brian considers himself on NZT the best version of himself. However, Brian's dad thinks he needs to get out of this. Brian's dad thinks he'll end up in jail or dead, which is mostly because Brian didn't tell him about the fact that Senator Mora has given him the anti-side effects shot. Although, maybe even if his dad knew that part, he'd be like, oh crap, that senator's going to get you. So either which way, the fact is, Papa Finch is not cool with what Brian is doing with the FBI. Once that is established, we flash to Boyle, Harris's partner, on a deployment in a war zone in a Humvee that gets blown up. And then we jump to the future and see that Boyle has been hanging out with this friend who was on the deployment with him who got blown up, and he's telling him that he became an FBI agent. However, even though Boyle's friend is happy for him, he is down on himself because he lost his arm in the explosion. And because of that, he's also lost his direction. Boyle tells him that you'll find your way. It just takes time. Everybody has a thing. Immediately upon seeing Boyle and his friend, who is Aaron Shaw, I think to myself, oh, this guy is going to be the main character of the episode, especially given the fact that it's called Arm-ageddon, which is a clear reference to the fact that Boyle's old friend lost his arm in the war. We once again jump within this story, and it is revealed to Boyle that his old friend has gotten a robotic arm that responds to his own thoughts. We figure out here it was Boyle who recommended that Aaron Shaw be accepted into this test program for these robotic arms, which just shows how good of a friend he is. Unfortunately, now that we're in the current time, Boyle's friend is seen calling 911, and then we find out that he called Boyle immediately after. Aaron Shaw tells Boyle that he didn't kill his wife, it was his arm that did it. And so when Harris gives Finch his pill for the day, they go to talk to Aaron Shaw with Boyle to try and prove his innocence. Brian is blown away by this explanation from Shaw that, yes, he was there when his wife was getting murdered, but it wasn't him, it was his arm. And Aaron says that he's innocent, but his arm is guilty. Brian immediately thinks maybe someone hacked the arm. And so they go to find the manufacturers of it, and they say that they had hired all of the best or the smartest people on the planet to hack the arm, and nobody was able to. So at this point, Brian wants to try his hand at hacking it, and he feels like it was a challenge when they said that it couldn't be done. Really fun line here. Brian says, "I'm going to hack the unhackable." Only one thing, what is hacking? It's just such great writing. And Brian then realizes after doing some research that the reason all the movies just show a montage of typing is because hacking is really boring. After 1 week of practice, Brian thinks that he has gotten somewhere with the hacking, only for him to get a knock at the door. I knew it was going to be his dad, because just like his dad was avoiding Brian in the last episode, this time Brian is now having to avoid his pops because dear old dad wants Brian to quit the FBI. When Brian opens the door for his dad, he finds out that his dad went to an old legal friend of his about Brian's situation, and Brian is not happy about this. He said, "I told you that in confidence," and Pops is like, he keeps saying us. He's like, oh, he's going to help us. Not realizing that he and Brian are not on the same page. I was like, Dad, stop saying we. And And when we get away from the dad situation, Brian successfully hacks the arm. But now the makers of the arm want to recruit Brian into their program because they think they have all of the best and brightest, and not knowing that Brian is on NZT, they think that he is perfect for their company. At this point, Boyle is relieved that Brian has proved it is possible for his friend to be innocent. As Brian takes his next NZT pill for this new day, he says, "Here's to hunting hackers." I mean, just all the great lines in this show. Right as Brian takes his NZT pill, Harris walks in and tells Finch and Boyle they need to come see the TVs out there because a hacker has hacked more of the robotic arms, causing car accidents and destroying art and chopping off a guy's finger, basically just creating a bunch of chaos. Brian makes a bunch of title puns like Arm-ageddon and things of that nature, but nobody finds it funny in the room, which makes it even more amusing to me, thinking that his funny lines are funny because they don't think they're funny. Naz, Harris, Boyle, and Finch all go over what connects all of this arm stuff, all of the, whether it's a car accident or the art vandalism or whatever, and none of it really adds up. Harris seems to have landed on a possible inside job theory. Maybe someone in the company is out to get the ARM project. And so Brian thinks the head engineer of the project could possibly be both a hacker and the head engineer could both be the head engineer and a hacker in with radical beliefs. And because she has a strange real life and online catchphrase, it's part of what leads them to believe this. But the big problem is that Brian thinks it's all just too easy. And once they have her in custody and are trying to prove what's what, Harris comes to Brian's place to tell him that they figured it out. And he confides in her that he told his dad everything. And she wants Brian to simply to tell his dad that he wants to stay, and she believes that he'll understand. After they have the head engineer lady in custody, Brian figures out that she was a patsy all along, and that a different guy, his name's Kenny, he was the one who was really profiting off of all this. He sabotaged all of it to make money, moved himself to Dubai to live with these riches. So Brian, knowing that the United Arab Emirates are very pure in nature or have a certain moral code, devises a plan to get him kicked out in just under 72 hours. Brian and all of his hacktivist friends post up all this information about Kenny with Photoshop jobs and stuff to get him kicked out of the country, which is really funny. And when Kenny is brought back to America and is interviewed by the FBI, that's when it's revealed that it was actually Shaw who Kenny worked with to get this whole thing going on, because Kenny realized that he didn't kill anybody. It was Shaw himself who did. But the downside is now it's too late, and Shaw has been released pending a new hearing. And so Boyle goes to confront his old friend from the deployment, and he realizes that he had always had a blind spot for those that he served with, which is, totally understandable. But we see in the background that Brian has a laptop out, and since he was able to figure out how to hack the arm, he gave that information to all of his hacktivist friends, and Brian tells Shaw that if you start hitting yourself, and then he makes the robotic arm hit him, to know that it's Brian reminding him that he can't get by with this. At this point, it's been a very fun, interesting, action-packed episode, but we then take a new, different track where Mr. Finch confronts Naz and says how that basically it's a parent's responsibility to protect their child. And since Brian won't let him protect him, it's now he's telling her that it's basically her responsibility at this point. But the writing is so good that at the beginning of his speech, I'm thinking that he's putting his nose where it don't belong. But by the end, I'm actually on his side. I'm like, great job, Pops. And so to me, this is another great 5 out of 5 episode. Just makes me wish this show would get a revival because there's so much depth through to this whole universe, and it's such a great concept that that deserved better treatment. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Come back Friday and see you this coming Monday for Monday Movie Mayhem, and tune in next week as we continue down the road of the Wednesday Rewind. We're going to be halfway through Limitless come next week, episode 11. Thank you. Later.